Great, thank you, Russ. So welcome everybody to Teams Day Online Modern Workplace Summit, and really appreciate for Russ and the organizing team to bring this event, and obviously inviting me over to speak about the Microsoft Teams integration with SharePoint. So let's crack, get ahead. So just before we go into this session, I just want to say a big thanks to the sponsors, the WebCon, External User Manager, Microsoft, Jabra, Excel 365. Without them, this event would not happen. So if you haven't checked out, then please do so because this event would not happen. And so once again, thanks for the sponsorship. Okay, so just quickly a bit about me. I'm Chirag, work with Patel Consulting in the UK, and kind of work in capacity of IT pro with variety of tech, mainly with Microsoft 365 and SharePoint and Teams and other technologies as well. And generally, I tend to sort of work around with various end user organizations as well as some of the gold partners to help deliver solutions to their customers as well. I speak quite a bit in the sense that I think about 10 times in a year, and I'm really grateful for some of the community events that I'm speaking at. It's the only way I can get to learn from others. And so by all means, I wouldn't like to say I'm an expert, but certainly what I've learned through various projects, through various learnings, then I'm happy to sort of share that on this session here. My slides are already up on the slideshare.net/techchirag, so do take a look at them, as well as some of the previous session slides as well. Okay, so just a very quick intro around Microsoft Teams, and we've probably seen this in a number of sessions, but really, in contrast to SharePoint, Microsoft Teams is essentially the hub for teamwork in the sense that you're able to bring all your chats, conversations, meetings, as well as third-party applications and connectors all into that one single chat workspace to essentially get things done. The question I always get sometimes is which one should we use, Teams or SharePoint? And the magical answer there is obviously it's to do with collaboration. Essentially, Teams is not just the files, but also SharePoint is also where you actually do your work around the files aspects of things. With Teams, obviously, it takes that one level up to be able to bring all those things together, together with security and compliance across the Teams and SharePoint. But as far as if you're a Teams user, it really doesn't matter whether you're using SharePoint or not, even though SharePoint is the file holder for it. So for those in terms of SharePoint, then what exactly is SharePoint? At the heart of it, yes, you can create lots of intranet sites, your team collaboration sites, maybe even knowledge portals, or even specific business application sites. But at the heart of it, it's essentially 5 things you can do with it. Yes, you can, major part of it is to be able to store and manage your files, but not only in just a single library, which is essentially what you get with Microsoft Teams when you create your channels, but also in addition to your files, you have the ability to create and manage a variety of web pages. Typically, they come in the flavor of your news pages, which you can drive your project updates or team updates, which we're going to look at that, and being able to bring all that into your Microsoft Teams chat space. You can also then do lists in SharePoint, just like any list you may have. You may have a list of, say, purchase orders or business cases, or even if you're a, say, HR department, and if you receive lots of queries from users, emails, whatever it is, you can create yourselves a list, just like an Excel list. Except the difference here would be is that you would have a lot more richer view of your list compared to a single Excel file that might have all the rows inside them. And then you've got your sites as well. So essentially with every Microsoft Teams chat space you create, you essentially get one SharePoint site with it. So if you've got 100 teams in your organization, then you're going to have 100 SharePoint team sites. If you're not using Teams already, but you come from a SharePoint background where you have all your nice looking information structures, like in an enterprise content management scenario, then you can still go ahead and create teams for that particular site as well, and being able to bring that file experience inside Microsoft Teams as well. And then finally, from a developer perspective, doesn't matter whether it's SharePoint or Teams, it's using the single framework for it to be able to develop and customize your Teams as well as your SharePoint sites. For this particular session though, today, I'm not going to use any code. I believe in more of a configuration of the sites as well as Microsoft Teams to be able to deliver those solutions very quickly. So that's hopefully kind of gives you an idea in terms of some of the differences between SharePoint and Teams. And it's not to be looked at as a separate products, but they work together, just similar to what Chris mentioned in his earlier session with Teams and Stream. They work together just like SharePoint and Teams. They both work together as well. So it's an integrated experience from that perspective. Quick slide about the structure. Some of you may already be aware of that for experienced Teams users, but for those, and I do visit a lot of organizations where they don't have the SharePoint skills or enough of Microsoft Teams, and then generally there is obviously an overlap around where exactly my files are stored, and especially when you see OneDrive appearing in your Microsoft Teams as well. And so the key differences here essentially is that, as I mentioned, that for every team you create, there is a SharePoint site. In that SharePoint site, you can have, the single document library you have has got all your folders, which are essentially your channels. And then for each channel, you have all your set of files. And that's pretty much how the Teams file structure contains. Obviously, if you look into the OneDrive, and in which case, let's say your organization doesn't allow you to create teams at your will, then what you might end up doing is you may create your small group chats with your colleagues or teams across different parts of the company. Then that ad hoc chat that happens in Microsoft Teams and any files you share will reside in OneDrive. And the thing to bear in mind here is that if that staff member leaves the organization, eventually his or her OneDrive will get deleted, and then you have a risk of losing that file within that OneDrive. So the message here is that if you do start your collaboration, your conversations through your ad hoc group chats, if that kind of becomes a big, kind of a critical mass, then do go ahead and use Microsoft Teams chat space, because then with SharePoint site, it's always going to be backed up, and whether you leave the organization or not, the SharePoint site will still be there. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. And then obviously you've got your permission scenarios as well, so that in OneDrive by default it's private to you, whereas in SharePoint it's shared based on the membership of security that you use. So number of ways of creating a SharePoint team site. If you're using just Teams, then it does that for you in the background, but you may have a different scenario where you may potentially create an Outlook group or even a planner, or even within your SharePoint site. And it's so quick and easy to actually create and associate that with the team from a SharePoint perspective. So let's take a look at that as to quickly how we can achieve that. So I'm just going to go over to my demo site. So if I just go into my office.com, which is where I am, go into SharePoint, and then I get this nice start page, home page for all the activities that's happening around me and around my sites and info I have. But I can just go ahead and click on create site. and I'll get choices of 2 sites. In this case, I'll choose team site because this particular site is connected with something that's called Office 365 Group, which is what's the foundation for Microsoft Teams. You also have communication site should you wish to create a kind of an intranet type or presentation type site to consume content for the wider audience. So we'll go ahead and create our site, and you can see that it's going to be connected to our Office 365 group, and we'll call this Teams Day Online. And I won't bother adding the members. The address is available, and I'll just go ahead and next. At this stage, I can add my members. The members you add over here is exactly the same that you would normally add if you were a team owner. So I'll just go ahead and finish that. So it's just me at the moment, myself. And then by default, what you get essentially is a navigation containing some of these items, your OneNote, a default document library, and so on. And then you've got your Canvas page, which essentially every page in SharePoint has got the web parts, which is essentially the building blocks for bringing all your integration pieces from Office 365, such as Stream or even Planner and so forth. So we'll look at that as well. But once I've created my site, then I've got this little action at the bottom left saying that I can actually now associate this SharePoint site with my teams. So I can just go ahead and say, click create a team. And then in sort of within a few seconds, it will just go ahead and create that. So there it goes, success. Click here to go to your team. So I'll do that. And I don't want to do that because I've got this team session running right now. So I'll go and say, use the web app. And so I'm using this fictitious demo company, Contoso Electronics. So I've got some additional teams that I'm a member of, but there's my Teams Day online team chat space. So really doesn't matter whether you're in Microsoft Teams or SharePoint, the end result is the same. You got yourself a collaboration space, and now as an owner, or if any members are invited to this team, then I can start creating my channels and also the other functionality you get with Microsoft Teams. So that's kind of a quick way to get yourself your SharePoint site and the associations that you have with Microsoft Teams. So when you look at the spectrum of activities that you can do with SharePoint, in particular with this SharePoint team site, yes, we've just had a quick look. Creating your team site is very fast, but once you've got your site and when you're in your Microsoft Teams chat space, depending on your scenario, if all the users are doing your chats, your conversations, bringing your other business solutions that you may have, which you kind of run through your chat space, or even just working with files. But what you can then do with SharePoint is kind of a series of activities. So yes, you can build, you can post your news pages, you can synchronize your documents from multiple libraries or even a folder as well if you wished to your desktop, and still be able to work with your documents and making changes as long as you're connected and they're kind of in sync. You then probably may go ahead and once the site matures, you may start adding and creating some lists around the business cases, as we mentioned, or contracts, or any kind of list you may have. And then potentially going furthermore is being able to use Power Apps or Power Automate to customize those lists and being able to build an application from it through various kind of coding. So kind of this slide is kind of painting that picture, the kind of the length and the breadth of what you can do with a typical SharePoint team site. And then obviously you bring all your other Office 365 elements of it as well, being able to sort of integrate those experiences. So what we're going to do is, as the session is more demo rich, I just wanted to kind of set the scene that we'll kind of go through some of these scenarios and kind of just bring all that into Teams. So let's look at that, SharePoint and Teams. So if I go into my demo back again, and this time I'm not going to use this, but I'm going to use the sales and marketing team chat space. So here's my, I've got two channels in sales and marketing. I've got general and monthly reports. And then within the general channel, I've got my default, which I can't change, which is files and posts. But then I've also got product launch event, which we know that from within Teams, you can bring your planner tasks as well as being dashboards. And this is good, that's okay, whilst you in your team chat space. But what if you want to bring a bit more than that, not just simply because obviously these tabs will soon start filling up, and then you end up having your drop downs for your multiple tabs, and that's okay if you're able to kind of maneuver yourself around. But what if you can bring that page from SharePoint that not only contains the planner tasks, but also being able to bring a team calendar as well, which the team calendar is not associated exactly with any of these channels, but is associated at the team level. So that's your group calendar. So that's what we're going to try and do now. So I'm going to head over back to my SharePoint. And go back to my sales and marketing. So I've got a bookmark there. So there's my SharePoint team site for sales and marketing for that particular team that I was in. And so here's my page that I've got a few things on it. I've got my little section here for bringing my team updates, and these are essentially your news pages. I've got on the right a few links, and I can add my icons. I don't really have to go looking for them on the internet. But also I've got something here that's called activity Webpart, which basically not only it will go and get all the items, not just like pages or documents, but even if I've sent an email, within my group email, it will pick up that as an activity, as well as a few other things around the files that I've edited. So I'm going to add a couple of things in here, and just to kind of demonstrate how easy it is. So I can just go ahead and edit this page. I don't have to go anywhere else for it, but what I'll do is I'll add a couple of things here. So on the right hand side, I can just hover around the last box that I have, which is this web part, and go and add a couple more web parts. I can maximize that because that's the view I always prefer, so that it doesn't clutter my workspace here. And these are the web parts you essentially have available to you, which does different things in there. And you can see some of the things you can do is bring yourself the Yammer feeds, conversations, or even Microsoft Forms, and Planner and so on. But in particular, I want to add the calendar. And this calendar is not a SharePoint calendar as you might be used to with some of the previous versions, but we're using the group calendar. So once I do that, then I get my group calendar here, which is fine because I know there are some entries in that particular team calendar there. So I've got all those information coming there, but I'll go one more down and add another web part for Planner. So I'll go and choose that. And then within here, I've got my configuration elements of it, so I can choose which particular plan I want to choose. And in this case, I'll just use product launch event, but I can have multiple plans in this particular team. Particularly what I want to display is not the board, but I might probably want to display is the charts, because the team chat space we had just now was displaying obviously just the tasks within that. So there I've got that, and that's probably, I can obviously adjust my width and everything else for this particular page, but for now I'll just kind of stick to that and go ahead and just publish that page. Now, if I go back to my page, so not a lot of change, except I've just added, excuse me, I just clicked on that PowerPoint, which I shouldn't have done that. So if I go back to see my page, and let me refresh that page because I went backspace to it. Yeah, there it is. So I've got my page that consists of that group calendar Webpart, as well as my status chart in there. And then I've got my activities on the left as well. So if I go back to my team, and I'll go ahead and just add a tab and basically bring that page into here. So as part of the customization of these teams, alongside all the connectors and tabs I've got, then I can go and choose my SharePoint connector. And then I get the options, as you would expect, that within this team, which I've got the SharePoint side, I've got my list of pages, as well as I've got my list, which we'll look at in a minute. But also what I'm able to do is not just from this SharePoint side, but I can also bring pages as well as other items from a different SharePoint side all together. As long as I've got permission to it, then I'll be able to see that content. So your security is honored based on what you have access to. So I'll just go ahead and choose this page here, which is sales and marketing, and go ahead and save that. And so now what I've got is essentially I've got that one page from SharePoint, and now I'm basically focusing on my Teams tab here, bringing all that page information within here. Obviously, I can expand that page because, sorry, the tab, if I don't want the full experience of the Teams, then I can see the full view of my page within the Teams itself, which to me this really ticks off a number of time-saving tips, because not only I can come back if I'm from a holiday or something to see what exactly has been going on in this team from a files as well as other elements, but also I've got my quick view of my charts of Planner and also my team calendar updates as well, which I can then go and click on these things. That takes me to various places. So hopefully that gives you an idea around building that page very quickly and easily, and bringing that into your Teams itself. Okay, so the next section we're going to look at is the files in particular. So I collapse that tab, and if I go into my monthly reports, now with files, depending on the experience of the users in terms of how you go about doing this, then one of the cool things you can do with this document library is, instead of just having a a plain view of your files, then obviously you can build yourself with lots of rich metadata. In this case, I've got sales, and then I've got my document status, and then I can go one step further into customizing the formatting of it. And the good thing about this is I'm not going back in SharePoint or some other third-party tools. I can do all this inside within my team. So, typically you've got your similar experiences to SharePoint in that you've got this document library here that displays your command actions here, uploading files, sync files, as well as being able to copy and so forth. But I've also got something here, which is the view of a document library. And all views is basically slicing or dicing your set of files to view in a particular way. So in this case, I've got status set for final. So I created myself final version documents. But then if I wanted to, say, create another view of that, then I could just go ahead and say, edit this particular view here. In that case, it's going to go back to SharePoint without for me to go and find my way into SharePoint. It just takes me straight back in there, and then I can change and configure my various columns. And you can see within SharePoint side of things, you got lots and lots of columns in there, which you can bring, or you can just create your own particular site. Sorry, for your own columns in your document library. I'm just going to put that back to all documents. So once I'm here, I can do lots of things as well. Again, if I select my multiple files, I can delete or move or copy them into different files. If I do that, copy, then it gives me an option of around which areas I want to go into. If I go into Microsoft Teams, then I can just go ahead and copy in in those particular elements of it as well. So the same functionality you get in SharePoint, you get that copy and move files within here as well. And then you can just go ahead and copy those things. Okay, unselect those, go back to my so that's kind of my default file that we have, but I can go that step further by going and bringing that particular document library in here as well, which I've got another one. I'll go into SharePoint sites for sales and marketing. Next, then you can see here that this particular SharePoint site, I've got more than just documents, which is where my team files live, but I may have a requirement to create an additional document library, whether that's a folder from your file share or from another repository, or just having a special folder with special permissions on it. Then I can choose that particular folder there and bring that document library inside here, and I'll probably call this confidential documents. And just name my tab within that Teams page as well. So there I know I've got 2 documents that I could bring in here. So the good thing about this is that the common scenario I normally get is that if I have my files, can I just put all my files in one repository, and that's okay to begin with. But then after few weeks or few months, as your kind of business change, you may then decide to kind of separate that out into multiple document libraries, and those conditions can exist in a number of ways. If you want to sort of start introducing security or be able to apply metadata within that as well. Once I'm in here, then what I can also do is being able to kind of bring, edit the files within, edit the library within here, so I can move my columns freely, as well as being able to do all my formatting settings within here as well. So I'm going to let me come back to that in a minute. Go back to my slides. So just taking a quick look, we covered up the groups and bringing the group information within this particular sites here, and then looking at the document libraries. Yep. And then you got your pages as well. So the pages side of things I wanted to bring was the news gallery side of things. So if I go into my, say, general channel, and one of the things you can do is being able to create your news or updates, then if I go into my tab to create new tab for news, so the first tab you get there is the news tab, which is going to have all your compilation of your different news articles and pages within that. So I can do that. Go ahead and do that. But all this gives me, and in terms of like the actual, instead of individual page, it'll give me all the list of news pages and everything else just as a display. The advantage here, of course, is that if you do communicate a lot of emails or sending updates or what have you, but if you do some of those updates in the form of news articles, then you can actually get these things out very quickly. At this point in time here, you would actually go into your SharePoint and being able to sort of set some of your news post templates. So I got one news here, which was an event last week on Teams Fest. So I got one article there, but if I want to use that particular template for a different event like the one today, then I can simply just go into my SharePoint, the website there, and go into this page here, and I can just go ahead and add the news post. And whilst I can do that news post here, here what I'm getting is just the 3 blank, the standard built-in templates. The template that I want to use is that Team Fest from last week, which is not listed here. So all I would do is I would just come out of here first and go into, edit that. Let me go back home. Go to my Teams Fest news page. And here I can click on promote, and I get this one option to say save this page as a template. So if this is a project which I may want to send frequent updates to the team, then this is one of the good methods I can do. I can choose this particular Team Fest news that I had, and I can just name this template to say use it for event news update. I can then just say events 2020, and then I can go ahead and still do my usual things around building the web parts as in how I want to configure my news. But at this stage, I'll just leave as this, and I'll just go and say save this page as a template. So all that's going to do now is going to make this news page template available. So now, if I go back to my homepage and create news post, then there you have this new template that I just created, email news update. So I'll choose that. And there's my preview as well that says, which is what I've written there. Go ahead, create that post. So essentially it's creating a news page now, but in this case, I'll just say Teams online event. And then I can obviously go into and customize my page here and just say, something along those lines, and then go ahead and just post that news in here. So all that's going to do now is just going to, still update the SharePoint site, and my latest news page will appear here. So Teams online event is there. And if I go back to my general channel and news page here, and if I just refresh or reload this tab, then that new article that I've got, Teams online event, a few seconds ago has just appeared. So this can happen dynamically as in how you add your updates to your SharePoint site and being able to bring all those updates in one page, in one tab here. I can, of course, obviously go and create an additional tab just to display this one news page if I wanted to as well. So that's about the pages side of things. The next thing I wanted to look at, essentially the final part of that is the actual the lists itself. And so lists are very good in a sense that not similar to your files, you're able to bring kind of your various types of data lists or export from other database systems. Doesn't matter what it is, you can bring all those things in as a SharePoint list as long as you're able to collaborate and share as and how you need it. So if I go into my SharePoint back again, and I've got a couple of lists here. I've got one list here called product list, and I've also got issues as well. So what I can do is I can do a couple of things. If I just go back to, in fact, let me go back to another SharePoint site. So this particular site here, sales and marketing, has got a product list with product type, product line, and so on. But also I've got issues list as well. I can just go ahead and create site contents, which is a map of the SharePoint site, and go into here and create my list. If I do that, this gives me more options. I could have done this from the home page as well, but it doesn't give me this many options. So if I'm in here, I can just go ahead and create my new list and just go ahead and create that. And you're not going to get many columns with that. Essentially, you're just going to get one title, and I can go ahead and add my new columns to it and define and so forth. But if I'm in another SharePoint site, which is also part of Microsoft Teams as well, and if I go into Mark Mark 8 project team. So I know there's a project site for that. So in here, if I wanted to go and create a new list, then what I can do, sorry, my mistake, if I go into site contents, then what I can do is I can bring a list from another SharePoint site altogether. So I'll go ahead here, new list, similar to what we did just now, but here I'm going to use from an existing list, and that's going to go and bring all the SharePoint sites that I have, at least the ones I have access to. And if I go and look for my sales and marketing site there, so if I do that, select the sales and marketing, it detects that there are a couple of lists in there, including the one that I just created. But in this case, I'll say I want to choose product list, give my name. I can say my product list. And this is good as long as this is the reference for it, then I can say, you know what, I can just use all the columns that I have, at least within this site, with this product list, then I can just go ahead and create that. So all that's going to do is not actually going to bring any data, but what we will do is it'll bring all the columns and, you know, including any lookups you might have within that. So if I go and click on those column settings and edit, sorry, that's the wrong one, product type. Then I've also got my choices options that I have within that. So that all comes across, but then I can go ahead and create my product list. So if you've got a sort of organization templates that you use for specific types of lists, then this is a good way of bringing that structure here, and you can start building your own lists, your own suppliers or your own customers or contacts, whatever that is. So I'll just close that tab and go to my sales and marketing list. Product list. So here I've got my usual list, 5 columns, and I can do things like if I go in here, product type, and change the setting for that to add some formatting options, then I can simply just go and say format this column. And here I've got my 2 choices. I can choose that this will apply to my product type, or I've got my other columns listed in there as well. So I'll stay with the product type, and I'll just say format those choice options, and it kind of automatically detects the unique values within those and then correspond those formatting options. But if I'm not happy with those color schemes, then I can still go and change my conditions all within this browser here, and maybe make that green perhaps. Games and accessories is somewhere down, and I'll go more greens. I think you kind of get the idea, so probably just choose different color. Games accessories, chose that to maybe blue. So instantly I can just go ahead and save that. So I can do with my heart's content and make the list look pretty enough anyways, in order to sort of filter out my values in there as per that. So if I go into Teams, and let's go to there. So I'll go and add my, I'll go into monthly reports, and I'll go and add a new tab. So similar to what we did with the news pages, I select the same connector for SharePoint, and this time I'll go into lists. And so I've got my new list that I created a few minutes ago, but I'll go and choose my product list and go ahead and save. And so what's that going to do is it's going to bring exactly the same list you have in here, but then you can go and do lots of things inside in this team space, just like in SharePoint, and still be able to achieve the same sort of outcome as well. So I can go into product line and go into column settings, and I can still do format my column there. It doesn't throw me out from Teams. It still keeps me in Teams, and I've still got my 2 options in this case to format my conditions as well. So rich functionality comes in here, But I can also go and do things like filter. I don't have to go and build filters for this. I can, these are built on the fly, detecting from this particular list, and I can just choose and pick any particular rows of data that I have within that as well. So I can do all those kind of SharePoint capabilities that I have within that, including things like group them as well by particular product type or even colors for that. So I've got all those things within that. But I can also go into here, into the information page, which is just like what you get within the SharePoint as well. So this is probably not a good one. I'll go into document library. No, there should be an, okay. I'll skip that. There should be an information activity pane for a particular document library that I can see what kind of activities gone in there. Let me just double check very quickly. Got another issues. I believe it's the issues list. So I've got another list here called issues, and I'll just bring that in. Okay, yeah. So similar. So I've been working with this list for kind of few days around it, but you can see that I got all my kind of audit trail, if you like, around what's been happening with this list. If other people are editing, I can see all those things in there, version and so forth. So kind of, it kind of just covers you kind of a brief, if you like, integration pieces from groups, lists, and libraries. The good thing about this is that in the mobile version of it, so if I just go to my mobile, and let me just switch that over. Bear with me a second, I'll switch over to my mobile. Okay, so there I have. So if I come in here, I've got my two applications open. So if I go first into my Teams, then within my Teams, I can go into, I've got my list of teams here, so sales and marketing. And then within sales and marketing, I've got my general. In fact, I was in monthly reports. So there's my chats and files. If I click on, tap on more, then there's my issues, as you would expect. But obviously, with the restriction of the mobile itself, so you got column by column. But if I just scroll to the right, then I've got my coloring options, everything that comes across in here as well, just like in SharePoint itself. And I can still view all the audits that I have within there as well. So all inside within the Teams that I went. But you may have noticed that as soon as I went to Teams, it brought me into SharePoint. And so SharePoint has got its own mobile application as well. So if I switch over to SharePoint mobile app, then this is what the SharePoint mobile app looks like. I've got my set of news that I've got in there. So if I just refresh, there's my Teams online event, which I created a few minutes ago. So I can see all my news, not just for this particular site, but for across all the other team projects that I have, and also being able to go into sales marketing homepage. So the homepage that we had there, and we created a couple of web parts. So let me refresh that. Okay, that hasn't come through. Okay. No, man. Anyway, I think so. It was just to kind of demonstrate that the same experiences from desktop as well as from anywhere else. I can bring that into my mobile as well. Okay, so that was the pages, and then we looked at the lists briefly. Similar to SharePoint, and you can have your document library is just like a list, except it's got the files in the same manner as you got your columns here. You can do the same within your library as well. And so when you look at it overall perspective, to kind of it doesn't matter where your files live. To kind of summarize on this part is that depending on where you do your work, your OneDrive is probably the starting point from a kind of a personal collaboration perspective. But if that becomes a kind of a 2-3 into a project, then obviously you want to kind of move that work into Microsoft Teams, because that's meant to be really for focused sort of groups of people and the work you do with it. Of course, you got a SharePoint site behind it, but the SharePoint itself, you can then go ahead and you can in fact share that to the wider audience if you wanted to. Not specifically that project, but you may create some additional document libraries or even a page in there which you may want to give access to everybody in the organization. So you can bring that together, but as well as being able to build your other intranet type sites solutions as well. So that kind of hopefully sets out the the kind of things you can do between Teams as well as in SharePoint. So with that, we're kind of at the end of the session, and just want to say once again thanks to the sponsors for making this event happen, and also to you, Russ, as well, for kind of taking us through this last couple of days, and obviously for the attendees. Any questions, I'll kind of look in a minute, then please fire away. But just want to say thanks to everybody for taking the time out to attend my session. Thank you.